Hello everyone, here to introduce you to the vendor add-on for World of Warcraft. This is a add-on meant to help keep your bags clear of all the kind of junk that you pick up along the way. And unlike most junk clearing add-ons, we don't just sell the gray items, we can sell anything that you want, anything that you specify, anything that bothers you being in your inventory or something that you just don't think is worth auctioning and want to just take care of it without even really thinking about it. It's all about convenience. It's about walking up to the merchant saying, sell this stuff. And here you go. Stuff is sold. No problem. Buy that back real quick just for later demo purposes. So at the base of it, the add-on just kind of works naturally for whatever you want to do. You can bring up the main UI for vendor by just typing /ven in the your chat console, or you can type /vendor, also works. You can see the kind of rules that we have for selling things. We also have keep rules and custom rules that you can define. We'll get more into that in a little bit. But the basics of the add-on is that we have a set of sell rules we process, and we'll go see if something is to be sold. We have a set of keep rules which determine if it's kept. Now we always use the keep rules before we use the sell rules, so anything that is in the keep rules will always be kept. For any of these rules, you can right-click to view what does the rule match. So if I right-click a rule, I get information about the rule. It tells me what's the actual script, which is kind of a little, we'll get into the script a little bit later for custom rules. But what is the script for this rule? It also tells you whether it's a keep rule or sell rule. And it also tells you all of the things that this rule matches. These are all the things in my inventory that are matched by this keep rule, which will never be sold. So I have uncollected appearances, got a couple BOEs here that are uncollected, so I'll make sure I don't want to sell those. Legendary banner items. Clearly I never want to sell my legendaries, at least not yet. So these are our default standard keep rules. We also have soulbound gears. You never want to sell anything that's soulbound, matches most of the things in my inventory. We used to have this rule as on by default, but because it matched so much and we don't really sell very much by default, we thought it was safe to just take it off and leave it there as an option if you want. We also have a bind on equip rule. You can just see all the things that are BOEs, common items, like uncommon items. We have a pawn plugin, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which also shows here all the items that are pawn upgrades. These are items in my inventory that pawn considers an upgrade, so it's not going to sell it. So obviously there's a lot of overlap here. But we also have another option that is kind of a whitelist or block list or keep list. So if you ever want to go through and make sure you never sell something, we have a set of hotkeys in our settings. So we'll go through key bindings. You can get to the settings by clicking the settings button or going through your normal, this is the normal interface panel. Go to key bindings. And you can see that there's 3 keys here you can bind. You can bind auto sell at the merchant, which is a manual trigger of the sell. We also have the toggle it as an always sell item or toggle it as a never sell item. So you can use that hotkey, just mouse over any item that you always want to sell or always want to keep. Like in my case, I always want to keep this mining pick, so I simply hotkey it to never sell. I can show you how to do that here. Exit out of that, unfortunately. Over here, and I can just hit my toggle key. You get a little feedback in the chat whenever you add and remove something from the list, and you have a little tooltip indicator that it's in the list for never sell, and the rule that it matches is items in the never sell list. So we have a couple hidden rules like items in the never sell list or items in the always keep list. And you can use that for other things like this cloak coordination. I never want to sell that. You can also use the always sell key if you come over and say, I always want to sell this elixir of plenty, I just don't like it. And now it will always be sold, regardless of whatever rules that you have. But going through and manually triggering all the things that you want sold with the always sell list, that can get kind of tedious, which is why we have a lot of other types of rules to help you out. So we'll go through some of the sell rules. We have our standard sell poor quality items. We have sell low-level food, which is basically any food that is 10 or more levels below you. So that generally means it's going to be from the previous expansion. So if you're leveling up a character or if you're farming old content, this is a very handy rule to just get rid of all the old food that you don't care about, nobody ever uses. We also have a minor convenience one here on by default, which is known toys. So these are any toys that are already known to you and are soulbound, so you can't really sell them, you can't auction them, so just better them away. And then we have threshold rules like uncommon gear and rare gear and epic gear, which you can set a level, and if you set the level, anything below that level will be sold. So I set this rule here, close it to save that setting off. Come over to some of these items that I have. This one's 208, so it's not going to be sold. Do I have one below? There we go. Here's one time level 136, and it will be sold by vendor because it's well under item level 200. And same thing for this one, this little trinket, it's 146. So these things will all be cleared out. But sometimes these default rules are just not enough because clearly I'm not catching this these artifact relics or champion equipment or other things or these old tokens I want to get rid of. So I'm going to show you how to create a few useful rules for that. So to create a new rule, you just get the create button. You can also go to the custom definitions where all the custom rules are defined. When you create one, they show up in the appropriate list, but you can also see them all defined in the custom rules list. So I want to create a new cell rule, and we have a nice rich help here for you to see what are all the properties you can use, what are all the functions that you can call. And this is really just a simple Lua evaluation in a very controlled environment. So we don't give you access to everything in Lua to do. It's just a very controlled environment where you have access to the item properties and a few functions that we give you, including some standard Lua functions like string library for good comparisons, that kind of thing. So here is a nice reference. We have lots of information about what all these things do and what they mean. But the more interesting thing is how do I create a rule for an item that I have? So I want to take this item like champion equipment and say, I want to sell this thing. You can pick it up, you can drag it over to this item info tab up here, and that will populate this, this little box here with all the properties of this item. You can see that it's expansion ID 6, you can see it's soulbound, you can see it's not equipment and all these other things, all its level and type. But the most useful ones is generally the type ID here and the subtype ID. Because those tell you really narrow in on the item, and it's also very efficient to query based on these two things because they're just numbers. So let's go ahead and start with a champion equipment cell rule. Then we'll go to our script. So what kind of script should we do? So for this one, it's best to start with like the type ID because that's a big general filter on items. I want type ID equals 0, which is exactly what it is here, and then subtype 8. Now, a quick note, you could use the text name. You could do type and put in quotes consumable, but this is a localized string. So if you want rules that kind of work on any locale, because later we're planning on having shared rules and whatnot, it's a little better to do the numbers, the numeric IDs instead of the strings. It's also faster because you're doing a string compare versus a number. So minor technical detail, but it's a little more performant if you use the IDs. So I've got the type ID and the subtype ID of 8. But the problem is that I don't kind of know yet. I need to identify it as champion equipment, and there's nothing in here. So we have a function to help with this called tooltip contains. And this allows you to scan the tooltip for any text you want to see. So in this case, I want to look for champion equipment. Sorry, I forgot the and. Validation rule was telling me it was invalid, as it was. So now my rule is valid. It says OK. So I think this will match my champion equipment, but I want to make sure. So I go to the Matches tab to see here are all the things that it matches. Sure enough, it's matching the champion equipment in my bag. So now I've got this rule. I think it's good. Go ahead and save it. It shows up in my cell. It's a little cell icon with the gold coin. And now at the bottom of my list is champion equipment. So this rule is now enabled. I can right click it like other rules and I'll bring up the edit and I can see the matches. So now when I come over here, look at my champion equipment. Oops, actually I turned it off. Close the window. You have to close the window to save the settings. But here, now it shows that it'll be sold and the sell rule says champion equipment. So that rule has been successfully created. So now I got something to handle all my champion equipment. Now something you might also want to do is artifact relics. So now, like equipment, I want to get rid of these old artifact relics. I don't really care to have anymore. So I'll put these here, and then I'll look at the item properties. And this one's a little bit easier to make because the artifact relics have just a very strong identifier with the subtype and the type ID, so I don't need to do a tooltip scan or anything for that one. So very easy rule to make. So artifact relics, cells, artifact relics. But this one I'm going to do below item level, let's say 200 to be consistent with all of my other ones. So, and this is just a description, nothing matters. There's just a note for you to know what that means. So, so in this case, we'll look for artifact relics. So we'll do type ID equals 3 and subtype ID, case matters. Subtype ID is 11. And actually, I think that's all I need to do to match. Oh, I forgot. Validation's working again. Put the equal sign. So you need double equals. Now my rule is good. Says it's okay. Check the matches, and sure enough, matches these two rules. But I wanted item level 200 or below item level 200, so I got to change my rule to less than level, or sorry, and level less than 200. Now it only matches the one that is under item level 200. The other one was 230, so it's not going to sell that one. Great. So now I have an artifact relic rule, got my champion equipment rule. Let's go ahead and make a few more. Do some transmog runs, so I get these old Vank tokens and corrupted protected tokens that are not useful for my class. So I'll introduce you to another more advanced rule to sell these guys. Drag this over here. So here's all the properties for my Vank token. See, this one's a little trickier because it's very generic, miscellaneous junk. So you don't want to just say miscellaneous junk. Try. Type ID equals 15 and subtype ID equals 0. Let's see all the things that matches. Ooh, that is not what I wanted to match. Matching some of the things I wanted to match. Most of this is actually stuff I would actually want to sell, but you know, it also matches things like my Hearthstones, which can't actually sell, so this is maybe safe, but this is a relatively unsafe rule because it can match a bunch of other things you don't understand. So let's make it a little more specific. Let's go and you can see that all of these have a classes indicator on them. Classes, rogue, death knight, mage. So being a warlock, I can't use any of those. So I want to look for tooltip contains classes. And now it's narrowed it down to just these tokens, which is great. But I don't want it to include any token that says warlock in it. So we have a nice constant or function actually defined for your class. So you can do tooltip contains, instead of putting in the string quote, you can do player class, which will return your actual player class. In this case, it's still, whoops, what did I mess up? Okay, well, clearly I have a bug. Sorry about that. Player class will work in the very near future. Okay. Looks like we had a small regression there, but instead, I will just type in Warlock. And it clearly does not match Warlock. Weird. Oh, sorry. Silly. Not tooltip contains Warlock. Yep, there we go. Now all is good. Actually, that means my player class actually worked. And sure enough, yes. There's no Warlock there. All is good. So, sorry about the minor confusion. A little stage fright making this recording here. Now I'll call this non-class tokens. So this sells tokens that aren't usable by your class. But if I want to make it tokens, I can also add another couple things to make sure that we're getting the right item. So I could do and is usable. Just make sure it's a usable item. Because all of these have a use. That's what the is usable means, is whether it has the use colon, create a class item. So these are all tokens. Another way you could do this, which is a little less flexible, is you can actually do a string match on the name containing Vanquisher or Protector. And if you just want to target anything with Vank or Protector in it, but again, you might match other things that you're not expecting. Okay, so after a little fumbling there, we got artifact relics, non-class tokens, all sorts of goodness in here. What about lock boxes? I can create one for lock boxes, but for now I will leave it alone. And I want to also tell you about, we have an extension for pawn, which is kind of handy. Not pawn upgrades. This is a cell rule that if you have pawn, this will show up. If you don't have pawn, this won't be here. And this will match everything that pawn says is not an upgrade for you. So this can obviously be a very aggressive rule, so you want to use some caution in enabling this one. But it's very handy when you're leveling, because as you're leveling a character, you're constantly swapping in new gear as you go, especially for particularly the new expansion, Battle for Azeroth. You're going to be swapping in your gear fairly frequently, and this is a very handy rule to just get rid of the old gear that you don't want as you're leveling up, and just vendor off the old soulbound stuff that you can't sell off or anything. So what you can do when you're leveling is set non-pawn upgrades, and then you set the keep rule for BOEs, so you can always auction house those if you come across them. And then you will be able to really keep your bags clean from all the stuff as you level up. There's also a pawn upgrades keep rule, which will keep everything that is a pawn upgrade. So that's pretty much it. That's our add-on in a nutshell. I want to go over a few more settings information for you, so you know how this works. There's a handy setting here called limit number of items sold to 12, which keeps you from selling more than the buyback limit. So the buyback limit at the merchant is 12. So if you sell more than 12 items, then some of them won't be able to be bought back. But if you set this checkbox, we'll only sell up to 12 for each sell batch. And then if you interact with the merchant again, then we will sell another set of 12. We also do auto repair. Yes, super convenient. Nice little bonus to the add-on is anytime you go up to a merchant that can auto repair, we will auto repair you and use guild bank funds if necessary. So handy little thing to just walk up to a merchant, do all the magic stuff, we'll take out all the stuff you want to sell, we'll repair you, and you'll be good to go, and you don't really have to do much of anything. That's our goal. I think we're pretty good at hitting that goal. So now I got all these things and I've set up my rules, and now once you set up your rules, you don't have to do this every time, but now that you set up the rules, you can just go do whatever. I just want to go do a double check here of my stuff. Yeah, got my stuff on my never sell list, so let's go ahead and just let it go. And away it goes. Sold 21 items for me, including all these um, old recipe that I had set up. It has the old tokens I don't use, the food, those sort of items. If I want to be a little more aggressive with these items that I sell, I could say anything under, say, epics, say anything under 225 or so. That's pretty good. Now it'll sell 11 more things that are all the unshackled stuff that I picked up along the way. So now you can see how this works and how it keeps your bags clean, and you can make whatever rules that you want to do. And yeah, that's it. We have a great page on Curse projects. If you have any issues, you can post there. If you have any feature requests, you can put it there. If you have any ideas to make the add-on better, let us know. Happy to help out. And thank you for watching, and hope everything works out great for you. Thanks. Bye-bye.